My name is Father Dismas. I'm a Franciscan friar of the Renewal, a community from New York. I was born in Kentucky and grew up there, and live in a country called Nicaragua. Nicaragua. Told everyone together? Nicaragua. 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 It's not in Africa. It is in Central America. And down there in Nicaragua, we have a number of different ministries, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. But first, I wanted to tell you, when I was younger, I went with my friends and the girl that I was dating at the time. Not as I wasn't a friar, right? Before I was a friar, went to the state fair in Maine, just to confuse you with another state, in Bangor, Maine. And we were having a good time. I was really young, and we were leaving the fair. We had gone on all the rides and everything, and we were just laughing and having a good time. And I was like walking backwards and talking to them, and all of a sudden I ran into this guy, and I looked around. It was like a David and Goliath moment, right? And I was like, and he goes, "Give me one reason not to beat the living daylights out of you right now." And so I reached into my pocket and I pulled out all of the carnival tickets that were left over and just handed them to him. And he's like, "Thanks." And I left unscathed. And I was terrified. I thought he was going to beat the living daylights out of me, and I'm not a big guy. I wasn't ready to defend myself, and I didn't want to be humiliated in front of my girlfriend and friends and everything. So I was terrified, and I had this just ingenious inspiration in the moment, right? What's going on in this gospel? Jesus, this woman, fear everywhere. Everyone's afraid. I was talking to Father Cladar last night at dinner, and he said, "So you live in Nicaragua, there's like scorpions and snakes and spiders." Check. All of them in the friary. You can find all of them. One time I gone to dinner, I sat down with the friars, and Father John Anthony, who's ex-military, is sitting in front of me, and he goes, "Wait." And I was like, "What?" "Don't move." And he gets up from the table, and he comes over and smacks me on the shoulder. There was a scorpion sitting on my shoulder. Apparently had been underneath of my hood and crawled out like right there. So there's it's a dangerous place to live. And I said to Father Cladar, I was like, "Well, what do you got here?" "Nothing." There's just like dogs and cats and stuff. And I said, "Well, what's everybody afraid of? What are you afraid of in St. Charles, Illinois?" Well, like, what? Apparently tornadoes come through. Sometimes they're like ripping through Illinois, and they get to St. Charles, they're like, "That's a lot of work now." And they just leave. Fear, what are you afraid of? So there's not all those things, but there's fear because it's a natural human emotion. It's part of our experience. What are you afraid of? And what do you do with that fear? In this scene from the gospel, there's so much fear. The woman caught in adultery, in the act, they say. What on earth were those Pharisees doing that caught her in the act? That's some meditation for another time. But they bring her there in front of everyone. She's terrified. This is it. This is the end for her. Jesus is fully God and fully alien? Come on, fully God and fully man. And as a man, as a human being, he has all the experiences that we had, became like us in all things but sin, which includes all of our emotional life, the entire gamut of emotions. Jesus experienced them. Jesus cried, Jesus felt joy, and Jesus was scared sometimes. Was he scared in this moment? Was he afraid? It doesn't look like it. But if you think about it, this is not the first time that he's surrounded by a group of people that have rocks in their hands. They tried to stone him before. And what does the gospel say? And he walked through their midst. He just left. And there was another time when he went back to Nazareth. You remember this? And he preached in the synagogue. And then they ran him out of the synagogue and they ran him to the edge of the cliff. And they were going to throw him off the cliff. Do you remember that? This is early in the gospel. And he just walks through their midst. But was he afraid? He's a human. He felt fear. Yes. Did he feel fear in this moment? Probably so. But perfect love casts out all fear. St. John says in his first letter, perfect love casts out all fear. In the different ministries that we have in Nicaragua, I see fear a lot because not just the snakes and scorpions and stuff like that. We're chaplains at the prison in Nicaragua. It's a terrible place. Instill terror in you. We're chaplains at the hospital, so everybody's like sick and dying and afraid of things that are happening to their body, these illnesses. I also have the great privilege to work in a ministry, a retreat called Rachel's Vineyard. Some of y'all have heard of Rachel's Vineyard, probably. It's a retreat that's for folks that have, at one time or another in their life, decided to commit an abortion. So it's for both men and women that have had that experience, because it leaves indelible marks on the person. There's great grief and anguish that the person experiences after they've done this. And so there needs to be a process of healing. And so Rachel's Vineyard offers that opportunity to people. Recently we did a retreat, and there were 13 people signed up to go on the retreat, which is a good number for Rachel's Vineyard. We never take more than 15 because it's a very intense retreat. And you don't want 350 people knowing why you're on this retreat. But maybe you can handle 14 other people knowing why you're there if they all were there for the same reason. And the day before the retreat, there were 13 people who were supposed to be on the retreat. The day of the retreat, do you know how many people showed up? 4. Many of them have already paid their spot on the retreat. They didn't come because they were terrified. They're paralyzed with fear. It's a very fearful thing to be accused, to find yourself before the eyes of others, under the gaze of their judgment. There's an exercise that we do in that retreat. This is a spoiler alert. If at some point somebody's going to go live in a Rachel's Vineyard retreat, just erase the disc after this homily. But there's an exercise that we do very early on in the retreat where we read this gospel of the adulterous woman. And then afterwards, I get up, sort of as the Jesus figure, and I have a big rock in my hand, a big one, a heavy rock. And I go to each one of the participants, and I take a knee before them, and I hand them the rock, and they hold it in their hands and feel all the weight of it. And I ask them, is there someone here that condemns you? And they look around, and they say, no one. I said, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. Condemn what was done? Okay, yeah, but the person, no. I don't condemn you either. Jesus doesn't condemn those who come to him and ask for forgiveness. One of the women on the retreat was dealing with an issue, and I noticed that she was really upset, and I said, is there something going on? Do you know what you're feeling? Because sometimes we don't even know what we're feeling. We can't even really articulate it. I said, do you know what's going on inside of you? She said, yeah, I'm afraid. Why are you afraid? I'm afraid because I'm ashamed of what I've done, and I'm afraid of what the rest of these people think of me. I said, well, what if we kind of work through that? Would you be willing to do that? What if we got up and told somebody else in the group how you feel? And she's like, no. Would you do it for Jesus? Okay. And so I took her by the hand and walked her over to another woman. I said, who do you want to tell this to? I want to tell it to her. And so she walks over, and she says, and she looks her in the eye, she says, I'm afraid. And the other woman asked her, why are you afraid? Because I'm ashamed. The other woman that she had gone to talk to had spontaneous abortions or miscarriages, right? And so she said, I'm ashamed because I didn't want my child, and so I got rid of it. And you wanted your child and couldn't have your child. And I'm ashamed even to look at you in the eyes. I'm afraid of what you think of me. And the woman just looked at her and she said, I don't judge you. I don't condemn you. I don't even know you. Later on in the weekend, they've been carrying around a rock the whole time. And the rock is supposed to identify with something that they're carrying, some weight that they're carrying around that they can't get rid of. And so this lady, I said, have you figured out what this rock represents for you? And she said, yes, I got it. It's my shame. I said, okay, what do you want to do with it? So I want to go to the woods and I want to throw it away. And so we went and we all went together with her. And she made a speech and she talked about how she was done with the fear and the shame that was associated with it. And she just took the rock and threw it as far as she could, and it literally broke into pieces, this rock. I said, do you know what you want to replace that shame with? She goes, shamelessness. I was like, oh, wait. You probably want to choose a different word for that, but I get your point. Like freedom from the shame and freedom from the fear that you feel. Because perfect love casts out all fear. And that's what Jesus does in this scene. Even though maybe he felt some fear, perfect love casts it all out. And so he can stand in perfect confidence and squat down in perfect confidence just right on the ground while they're deliberating and have their stones and get up in perfect confidence and say, does one of you all have no sin? Because if one of you doesn't have any sins, then go ahead and throw the first rock. Fearlessly, he says it to them, because perfect love has cast out all fear. There's another ministry that I do down there in Nicaragua, and it's natural family planning. Finding a way to plan the number of children that you have without contraception, just to make you all uncomfortable. You can shift in your seats now because I just used that word. Yeah, I'm just a visiting priest, and I can leave later on. Doesn't matter. So we do this ministry. I do this ministry, and so a lot of the folks they struggle with fear. It's like the main factor for wanting to use contraception, because they're afraid of having more children. They're afraid because they think they're terrible parents. They're afraid because they might die in childbirth. They're afraid. And people in the hospital torture them with fear. And they say, if you have another baby, you're going to die. I'm telling you. The doctor says it, and the nurse says it, and the nurse's assistant says it, and the person that comes to bring lunch says it, and the janitor says it. You're going to die if you have another baby. They just instill fear in them. But perfect love casts out all fear. And I could tell you the story of this young couple that immigrated from Italy to Argentina at the beginning of the 20th century, that when they had their first baby, the doctor told them, this is your last pregnancy, because if you have another one, she will definitely die in childbirth. And I could tell you that whole story right now, but I'm not going to. Because tomorrow night I'm going to tell it in the mission. And you can come at 7 o'clock if you want to hear about Henrietta and Giuseppe. But that's up to you. If you don't want to hear, that's fine. But I'll be there at 7 o'clock telling you that story. And I'll try to get done. I'll definitely get done before North Carolina and Kansas are on the floor. Deal? Okay. Jesus, with his perfect love, drives out all fear, which is what he does when he comes into your life with your fears that might not be snakes or lizards or anything like that, but you are afraid of something. I know that you are, because you're a human being. Your stress is like fear. Your anxieties are fear. What is that about, and why has Jesus not cast all of that out yet? Ask yourself, examine your conscience, and give him permission to cast out all fear with his perfect love. And he comes in his perfect love right now in this Holy Eucharist to cast out your fears and to give you the freedom of the sons and daughters of God.